December 17th, 1944. The Ardennes forest, Belgium. Obergefreiter Hans Miller crouched in his frozen foxhole, his pencil trembling as he wrote words that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "The Americans," he wrote, "are not like the Russians. Their artillery is something else entirely." It was not the volume of fire, though that was terrible enough, but the speed, the precision, the dreadful certainty that you had no time to react. One moment's silence, the next, the world exploded. Through the dense winter fog that morning, Müller had witnessed something that shattered every assumption German soldiers held about American gunnery. His battalion, part of the 6th SS Panzer Army, had just launched Hitler's final gamble in the West. They had achieved complete surprise against thinly held American positions. Victory seemed within reach. Then, the American artillery found them. What Müller did not know, what no German soldier advancing through those snow-covered woods could have known, was that they were about to meet the most lethal artillery system ever deployed in warfare. A system so advanced, so devastating, so precisely coordinated that it would break the back of Germany's last offensive and reveal the true depth of American military superiority. The collapse had begun long before the Battle of the Bulge. During 1943 and 1944, German veterans transferred from the Eastern Front carried with them hard-won lessons about Soviet fire. They had survived Russian bombardments by recognizing the patterns, the ranging shots, the pauses, the predictable rhythm of the guns. Even under hellish shelling, there was a kind of grim familiarity. The Americans were different, terrifyingly different. Gefreiter Otto Schmidt, a veteran of 2 years on the Eastern Front, later described his first encounter with American guns. He said, "We had taken position in a wadi north of Tunis, good cover. The Russians would have needed an hour to find us, and another hour to range their guns. We felt safe enough to heat our morning coffee. Then we saw it, a small plane no larger than a reconnaissance scout, puttering lazily overhead. We barely noticed. It had no weapons. We assumed it was photographing the terrain. 3 minutes later, without warning, without ranging shots, without a single hint, the entire wadi exploded. Shells landed simultaneously, not in sequence. Air bursts above, ground bursts among us. In 30 seconds, my company ceased to exist as a fighting unit. I was one of 11 survivors out of 123 men." The little aircraft, he later learned, was an L-4 Grasshopper, a humble Piper Cub used by American forward observers. To the German soldier, these unarmed planes became the most feared sight in the sky, not because they carried bombs, but because of what followed their appearance. When you saw a Grasshopper overhead, you had minutes, perhaps only seconds, before the American artillery turned your position into a killing ground. Lieutenant Friedrich Bauer, a German artillery officer who had coordinated counter-battery fire on the Eastern Front, wrote of his astonishment in letters discovered decades later. He noted, "I studied American artillery procedures from captured documents. At first I believed them to be propaganda. No system could perform as described. The coordination required would be impossible. Then I saw it myself near Salerno. An American Grasshopper appeared. We tracked it, preparing to move our guns. Before we could even compute counter-battery data, shells were already landing on our position. Not random fire, not area saturation, but precise hits on each gun. They had calculated firing solutions, coordinated multiple batteries, and delivered simultaneous fire faster than our observers could relay a single coordinate." The secret to American artillery superiority lay not in one invention, but in a comprehensive system, an integration of technology, training, and industrial capacity that Germany could never match. The heart of that system was the Fire Direction Center, the FDC, a concept that revolutionized artillery warfare. Where German batteries each calculated their own firing data, American units sent all information to a central hub, capable of coordinating dozens of batteries to strike a single target. Behind those calculations stood an army of mathematicians, mostly women, in offices across the United States. With mechanical calculators, slide rules, and endless logarithmic tables, they pre-computed firing solutions for every conceivable combination of wind, temperature, altitude, and barrel wear. Their results were printed into pocket-sized firing tables carried by every fire direction officer. What used to take hours in the field could now be done in minutes. Hauptmann Werner Hoffmann, a mathematics professor conscripted into the Wehrmacht, examined captured American firing tables after the war. His analysis, preserved in German military archives, revealed a mix of awe and disbelief. He wrote, "These tables represent years of computational work, thousands of hours on mechanical calculators. They have pre-solved every variable we would face in the field. We, by contrast, must compute everything anew every time." The Americans had done the mathematics in advance. In battle, they simply looked up the answer. But even that was only the foundation. The true revolution was something called time on target, TOT. TOT coordinated artillery so that shells from multiple batteries, fired at different times according to range, would arrive on the target simultaneously, within a 3-second window. The effect was catastrophic. No warning, no ranging shots. One instant, silence. The next, dozens of explosions at once. German soldiers, trained to drop at the first shell, had no chance. Studies after the war revealed that 2/3 of artillery casualties occurred in the first few seconds of a barrage. TOT eliminated even those seconds. Stabsfeldwebel Kurt Zimmermann, who survived a TOT strike during the Battle of the Bulge, wrote, "It is not artillery as we understood it. It is something new. You hear nothing, then the world ends. Every shell arrives in the same second. The air bursts kill men who would survive ground bursts. The ground bursts kill men who would survive air bursts. There is no time to dive, no time to crawl, no time even to drop flat. You are alive one moment and dead the next." The speed of American response stunned German commanders. Their own gunners, once considered the best in Europe, took 8 to 10 minutes to deliver fire under ideal conditions. The Americans, 3 minutes. This precision and speed came from many sources. Forward observers with new FM radios, clear and static-free. Abundant communication gear, every infantry battalion equipped with multiple radio teams. And observers trained not only in gunnery, but in infantry tactics. They moved with the riflemen, lived beside them, and called fire as an organic part of combined arms warfare. More importantly, they could summon not just their own battalion guns, but the entire corps' artillery. One lieutenant, with a single radio, could bring down the weight of metal equivalent to a small airstrike, faster and more accurately than aircraft could deliver it. Oberst Heinrich Müller, commander of a German regiment destroyed near Saint-Lô in July 1944, wrote in his final report, "A single American infantry company, surrounded in a village, held my entire regiment for 6 hours. Every time we attacked, artillery fire drove us back. Not one battery, dozens. The forward observer with that company commanded more firepower than I could muster with my entire regiment. He concluded grimly, "We lost 400 men trying to overrun 120 Americans. We failed." The artillery pieces themselves revealed the scale of American industrial power. The M2A1 105mm howitzer, the standard American light artillery piece, was a masterpiece of engineering and mass production. At Rock Island Arsenal, factories turned out thousands of identical weapons with mechanical precision. By the end of the war, 8,536 M2A1 howitzers had rolled off the lines. Each U.S. infantry division fielded 36 of these guns, organized into 3 battalions of 12. Fully motorized, they were towed by trucks or half-tracks, able to move at highway speeds. To reposition from one firing site to another, an operation that took German horse-drawn batteries 2 to 3 hours, Americans could do it in 20 or 30 minutes. The difference was staggering. German artillery remained largely dependent on horses throughout the war. Despite Nazi propaganda showing endless convoys of mechanized armor, nearly 80% of German transport still relied on animal power. Germany entered the war with 500,000 horses. By early 1945, it relied on more than 1 million. Each gun needed 6 to 8 horses, and moving them through mud or snow was painfully slow. A single battery relocation could take half a day, and under fire, it was almost impossible. Gefreiter Paul Richter, a German artilleryman in Normandy, recorded his disbelief in his diary. He wrote, "We watched the Americans displace during battle. They fired. Then trucks arrived. Within 20 minutes, the whole battery was gone, vanished. We needed 2 hours, if the weather was kind. In mud or under fire, 4 hours, sometimes more. By the time we set up again, they were already shelling from their new position." He ended with a bitter line. "We were fighting a 19th century war with horses against a 20th century enemy with engines." The heavier guns told the same story. Each U.S. infantry division also fielded 12 M1 155mm howitzers, powerful weapons firing 43-kilogram shells over 14 kilometers. 10,300 were built before the war ended. Designed in the late 1930s, standardized in May 1941, the M1 combined range, accuracy, and reliability in perfect balance. It could be towed at highway speed, its crew trained to deliver 4 rounds per minute, 6 in short bursts. Yet, even divisional artillery was only part of the picture. At corps and army level, the Americans deployed truly massive firepower. Battalions of 155mm guns, 8-inch howitzers, and even 240mm monsters. Any of these batteries could be called upon by a forward observer, sometimes by a single lieutenant with a radio. The result was pyramided firepower, a structure that allowed a rifle company to call down artillery from battalion, division, corps, and even army-level guns, all within minutes. German artillery, by contrast, was chained by bureaucracy. Divisions had their own guns, but calling fire from corps-level batteries required multiple approvals through headquarters. Requests could take hours. By the time the fire came, if it came at all, the Americans had already moved. Lieutenant Friedrich Bauer, a German forward observer in Normandy, wrote of one such ordeal. He wrote, "I called for corps artillery at 0915 hours. The enemy was massing tanks for an assault. I sent precise coordinates, described the situation in full. At 13:30, 4 hours later, I finally received 3 salvos. By then, the tanks had attacked, broken through, and withdrawn. Our position was gone. I survived only by chance." The technical superiority of American artillery extended even to its ammunition.
While Germany struggled with propellant shortages and inconsistent shell production, American factories turned out endless supplies manufactured to precise standards that guaranteed uniform performance. But the most dramatic innovation came in the form of a fuse, the variable time fuse, or proximity fuse. It contained a miniature radar transmitter and receiver inside the nose of the shell. When the signal reflected from the ground or a target, it triggered detonation at the perfect height, usually 10 to 20 meters above the surface. The result was devastating. Conventional time fuses demanded tedious calculations and precise timing. A small error could make the shell explode harmlessly in the air or bury itself before detonation. The VT fuse eliminated all of that, guaranteeing optimal airburst every time. It was first used at sea. On January 5, 1943, the cruiser USS Helena shot down a Japanese dive bomber off Guadalcanal using only a handful of proximity-fused shells. By 1944, VT fuses had become the terror of Japanese pilots and the nemesis of Germany's V-1 flying bombs. Still, the U.S. Army had been forbidden to use them in Europe for fear unexploded shells might be recovered by the Germans. That changed in December 1944. As the Battle of the Bulge raged, Eisenhower personally requested authorization to employ the fuse against ground targets. The Pentagon hesitated, but Eisenhower insisted. Permission came between December 19th and 21st, just as the German offensive reached its height. When the VT fuse arrived on the battlefield, the effect was immediate and apocalyptic. German formations caught in the open simply disintegrated. Naval tests had shown VT shells to be 3 to 4 times more effective than conventional ones. Against troops, they were worse, creating deadly airbursts that rained fragments down into foxholes and shallow trenches. Obergefreiter Hans Müller, the same soldier whose diary opened this story, survived one such barrage. He wrote, "We had learned on the Eastern Front to go flat at the first explosion. Even shallow depressions offered safety from horizontal fragments, but these shells, these demon shells, exploded above us. The fragments fell vertically, striking men who should have been safe. There was no defense. We simply died." The psychological impact was as great as the physical. German troops trained to react instinctively by diving for cover found their instincts useless. No hole was deep enough, no trench safe. Panic spread faster than shrapnel. Lieutenant Friedrich Bauer recorded the near mutiny of his own men in the final weeks of the Ardennes offensive. He wrote, "My company was ordered to attack an American position 300 meters away. The men refused. They had seen what American artillery did to troops in the open, especially with these new fuses that explode in the air. I tried to reason with them, told them we would die anyway if we stayed. They would not move. They preferred the chance of capture to the certainty of death." Even German officers, veterans of the Eastern Front, admitted that nothing in their experience matched it. In one letter home, an artilleryman simply wrote, "The Americans do not fight us with courage alone. They fight us with mathematics."
The industrial capacity that produced America's artillery and ammunition in such staggering quantities represented a dimension of superiority the German soldier could scarcely comprehend. Rock Island Arsenal alone produced more than 10,000 105mm howitzers. Dozens of factories across the United States turned out 155mm guns, heavy howitzers, and endless shells. German production, by contrast, staggered under relentless Allied bombing, dwindling resources, and a fractured industrial system obsessed with complexity. Their artillery pieces were often elegant in design, but too few were made, and too slowly.
By late 1944, many German batteries were operating at half strength, their guns destroyed or worn out, their ammunition supply exhausted. Lieutenant Werner Vogel, an artillery officer on the Western Front, recorded the situation in his wartime diary. He wrote, "We received 50 shells per gun for the entire week, 50 shells to support an entire regiment under constant attack. Every fire mission had to be justified to battalion headquarters. We spent more time writing reports than firing." Meanwhile, American gunners fired thousands of rounds a day, unrestricted. Their forward observers called for fire freely, knowing that resupply was endless. "We fought a poor man's war," he concluded bitterly, "against an enemy of wealth." The disparity shaped doctrine itself. German artillery emphasized concentrated fire on high-value targets, carefully planned and rarely used. American doctrine emphasized responsive fire, immediate support for the infantry anytime it was needed. A U.S. platoon leader could request and receive artillery support in minutes. A German lieutenant might wait hours, if his request was approved at all. American logistics made this possible. The U.S. Army's supply network was fully motorized. Convoys of trucks delivered thousands of shells to forward positions every night. German batteries, dependent on horses and limited trucks, struggled to move ammunition even a few kilometers. Allied air power worsened the problem. Every daylight road movement risked destruction from the sky. By late 1944, many German units often fired only what they could carry on hand, because the next resupply might never arrive. American standardization simplified everything. The M1 fuse used on the 105mm shell was identical to those on the 155 and the 8-inch. Fewer parts, fewer bottlenecks, constant supply. Germany, obsessed with variation, used multiple fuse designs and incompatible calibers. Shortages cascaded through the system. The result was inevitable. German commanders, terrified of American counter-battery fire, began dispersing their troops to avoid detection. But dispersed units lacked combat power and coordination. Concentrated forces could fight, but became easy targets for American gunners. Any choice led to destruction. The Ardennes offensive, Hitler's last great attack in the West, exposed these truths in brutal clarity. German planners counted on bad weather to ground Allied aircraft. They forgot that American artillery needed no clear skies. During the first days of the offensive, German armored and infantry divisions achieved deep penetrations against thin American lines. 200,000 German troops and 1,000 tanks surged forward on December 16, 1944. Then, the American artillery found them. Without the mobility to shift positions quickly, German batteries were annihilated in place. Stabsfeldwebel Kurt Zimmermann, whose diary survived the battle, recorded the grim pattern. He wrote, "Our battery was hidden in woods south of St. Vith. We had 50 shells per gun, our total allocation for the operation. We fired one mission in support of our infantry. 10 minutes later, American artillery destroyed 3 of our 6 guns. Most of the horses were killed. We tried to move the remaining guns, but had no teams left. We abandoned them and fled on foot." Across the front, the story was the same. German guns silenced, American guns never. Even during the siege of Bastogne, when U.S. forces were surrounded and ammunition rationed to 10 rounds per gun per day, artillery still decided the outcome. When the skies cleared after Christmas, supply resumed and the thunder returned tenfold. During the entire Battle of the Bulge, 4,155 American guns fired over 1,250,000 rounds. German units that had advanced 50 kilometers were trapped, cut off by the same relentless barrages that had shattered their spearheads. Oberst Heinrich Müller, whose regiment had been destroyed near Saint-Lô months earlier, now commanded a replacement unit during the Bulge. Captured in January 1945, his final report offered a blunt assessment. He wrote, "We were defeated by American artillery before we were defeated by their infantry or armor. Every movement we made was observed from the air and engaged by artillery. Every concentration of troops was shattered before it could attack. Every defensive position was broken before it could be held. We could not move. We could not fight. We simply ceased to exist as a force." The offensive, meant to reach Antwerp and split the Allied armies, collapsed within a week, crushed, first and foremost, by American guns. Units that began the battle at full strength ended it with 30 to 40% casualties. Those who survived carried with them a single truth, that Germany had been outgunned, not merely in number, but in system, in science, and in sheer industrial might.
For the German soldiers who survived the American artillery, defeat was more than a battlefield loss. It was the collapse of an entire belief system. Those captured and sent to prisoner of war camps in the United States soon discovered that the artillery which had destroyed their units was only one expression of a far greater force: America's industrial and organizational power. Gefreiter Otto Schmidt, taken in Tunisia and held in a Texas camp, wrote home after witnessing a train yard packed with freight cars. "I have seen American industry," he wrote. "I have seen trains loaded with artillery pieces, hundreds of them, rolling toward the ports. I have seen factories turning out guns by the thousands. The Americans did not defeat us through courage alone. They defeated us through industry. They could afford to fire 100 shells where we fired one. They could lose equipment and replace it in days. You cannot kill an enemy like that." Captured officers saw the same lesson in training demonstrations. In camp classrooms, American artillery officers lectured their former enemies, explaining how the system worked, how mathematics, logistics, and mass production had replaced intuition and improvisation. Lieutenant Friedrich Bauer, captured in Italy, attended several of these sessions. His notes, preserved in archives, show professional admiration more than resentment. They systematized everything we tried to accomplish through individual skill, he wrote. Where we relied on gifted officers to calculate fire solutions by experience, they created tables that let any average officer do the same. Where we depended on excellent radio operators to maintain contact under stress, they built radios so reliable that even minimally trained men could use them. They took the art of artillery and turned it into an industrial process, repeatable, scalable, and unstoppable. The transformation among prisoners went beyond technical respect. Many realized that German propaganda about weak American soldiers was a lie. The Americans they met, both in battle and in captivity, were disciplined, resourceful, and supported by an organization that dwarfed anything Germany could build. Obergefreiter Hans Müller, whose diary had begun in a freezing foxhole in the Ardennes, was captured during the final collapse of the offensive. His later entries, written from a POW camp, show a complete reversal of belief. They told us the Americans were soft, that they had no fighting spirit, that they depended on machines because they lacked courage. It was all lies. The Americans fought bravely and skillfully, but they also fought with resources that courage alone could never overcome. Most of all, they fought with artillery so advanced that we had no answer. That, more than anything, defeated us.
By early 1945, Germany's military situation was desperate. Artillery production collapsed under Allied bombing. Experienced gunners were dead or wounded, replaced by poorly trained recruits. Horse losses crippled mobility. Batteries that once fielded 6 guns now managed 2 or 3, sometimes none at all. American artillery, by contrast, grew even stronger. Production increased as the war neared its end. New technology, improved fire direction centers, better radios, early mechanical computers made the system faster and deadlier than ever. In the final battles of 1945, a single American battalion could unleash the firepower of an entire German division. Multiple corps could coordinate time-on-target strikes over entire map grids, obliterating defenses before infantry ever moved forward. German survivors of those last engagements spoke of awe as much as terror. Hauptmann Werner Hoffmann, the mathematics professor turned artillery officer, was captured in the Ruhr Pocket in April 1945. In his final report for American intelligence, he offered a professional verdict. "The American artillery system," he wrote, "is the culmination of industrial age warfare. They applied the methods of industry, mass production, standardization, systematic training to create a weapon of unprecedented efficiency. Our individual guns may have been superior in design, our officers perhaps more skilled, but the Americans built a system that does not rely on individual excellence. It delivers consistent, overwhelming fire, regardless of who mans it. That system, not courage or chance, won them the war." In the decades after the war, historians analyzing American military effectiveness often reached the same conclusion. While tanks and aircraft captured public imagination, it was artillery, precise, responsive, and relentless, that broke German attacks, supported Allied advances, and inflicted the heaviest casualties on the Western Front. German post-war studies echoed that judgment. General Franz Halder, former chief of the Army General Staff, wrote in his analysis, "American artillery achieved what we once believed impossible. They transformed artillery from a supporting arm to the dominant weapon of the battlefield. Their coordination, their fire control, their logistics and production created a force that could not be matched or countered." German units in the West operated under the constant threat of American guns, unable to attack without provoking devastation, unable to move without being seen, unable to fight effectively under the storm of steel. The tactical innovations developed by U.S. artillery during World War II became the foundation of modern doctrine. Time on target remains the standard method for coordinating fire. Fire direction centers remain the heart of artillery operations. Forward observers, integrated with maneuver forces, remain essential for responsive support. The proximity fuse, once a closely guarded secret, was recognized after the war as one of the most significant technological leaps in military history. Its psychological effect matched its physical destruction, shattering unit cohesion and morale alike. For the men who faced it, the experience left permanent scars. Stabsfeldwebel Kurt Zimmermann, who had survived multiple time-on-target barrages during the Bulge, emigrated to the United States in the 1950s. In a 1960 interview, he was asked which weapon he had feared most in the war. He paused for a long moment, then answered quietly, "Not the tanks, though our tanks were outclassed. Not the aircraft, though their power was immense. Not even the infantry, though they fought well. The weapon I feared most, the one that still visits me in dreams, was the American artillery. The sudden, devastating fire that came without warning. The knowledge that you could die without ever seeing your enemy. That was the real terror. The story of German soldiers and American artillery is, in the end, the story of warfare's transformation in the industrial age. Individual bravery and tactical skill remained important, but they were overshadowed by industrial production, systematic training, and organizational efficiency. The Americans had created a system that multiplied the effectiveness of every soldier, turning average men into a force greater than the sum of their parts. The artillery that shattered Germany's armies in World War II was not the result of one invention or one genius, but of methodical analysis, industrial application, comprehensive training, and abundant resources. It represented American military power at its most effective, using organization, science, and industry to generate unmatched combat strength. For the German soldiers who faced that system, the lesson was unforgettable. They entered the war believing in their superiority and ended it understanding that industrial might and organizational genius had rewritten the very meaning of power. They learned to fear the American artillery above all other weapons because it embodied the unstoppable force of modern war itself.